There's no way this could have been an accident. Oikoa is a cutter. Realizing this pained me. I sat there in shock for several minutes. It made me realize how little I actually know about the guy. He refused to bring up anything from his personal life. It seemed a bit odd at first, but I now understand he had his reasons for doing so. I came to the assumption that he was bullied. He seems timid, shy, quiet and keeps to himself. These are usually traits that are associated with bullying. For some strange reason I felt like I failed him. If we met earlier I feel like I could have protected him. I lifted his arm gently to further my inspection. Seeing wounds on such a soft and delicate boy pained me. I was deeply curious to what his story was. I planned on confronting him about it tomorrow. If he decides he doesn't want to open up, then that's perfectly fine. I'll just do my best to be there for him. I stayed awake for hours thinking about how I would confront him. I didn't want to scare him off or make him angry with me. Before I knew it, the clock had already struck 4 a.m. Crap, I needed to get some sleep. I laid my head down, connecting it with the soft cold pillow that resided next to me. While I drifted off into a much-needed slumber, my mind tracked back to old memories, ones that I'll never be able to forget. When I was 14 I had a friend named Yuma, but everyone just called her YU. We were exceptionally close. Being the hormonal teen that I was, I had feelings for her. She knew this of course and said she just wanted to be friends. I was okay with that, though I did feel a little bummed for a time. Me and YU have known each other since 2nd grade. We hung out a lot when her parents were over. Like I mentioned before, my parents are always inviting people over without much care. They just enjoy the company. Me and YU shared many great moments together. When we entered high school we made many friends. We would all get together on Fridays and hang out for hours. One Friday she told me something I should have taken more seriously at the time. She struggled with her words, trying to open up to me. She told me she was becoming very depressed and her life was getting hard. Her parents were putting too much weight on her. They'd ignore her when she tried to tell them how gritty and pressured she felt. They didn't bat an eye, they didn't do anything other than stack the pressure. They just brushed her off as some teen going through one of those stages. What really hurt me though was that I didn't do anything to help her. I continued my life like I would have normally. I was ignorant and too blind to see how bad she was actually hurting. She eventually started cutting. I hadn't even known until things got bad. One night an ambulance was called to their house. There was a lot of commotion outside. A lot of the neighbors gathered, curious as to what happened, same as me. It wasn't until later that night people started talking, saying that YU tried killing herself. I didn't know what to think. I felt like I'd been hit 1,000 times over in the head with a brick. This situation was foreign to me. I hadn't seen or experienced anything like it before. I couldn't fall asleep for 2 nights, trying to make sense of what happened. I was still too blind to see it. A week passed and YU was finally released from the hospital. She came to school the next day, seeming very distant. I didn't want to lose her, so I did my best to cheer her up. I followed her around the whole day trying to start a conversation, but she didn't speak a word, not a single word. I hadn't given up though. I told her what was going on around the school while she was gone. I filled her in on all of the chaotic events. I told her most things, but left out the rumors and talk going around the school about her attempt at suicide. The next day was like the last, and the day after, and the day after. She was completely closed off from everything and everyone. Then finally one day behind the school she finally spoke. She told me every foul, hateful word her parents glared at her. They called her stupid and ungrateful. This is when I started getting the sense that something was awfully wrong. I tried to comfort her but my words were weak. I sounded like a child reciting a line for a play. But I did mean every word I spoke to her. I asked her to promise me never to try anything like that again. She gave me a short smile before agreeing to it. That day I went home feeling good. I felt happy that I wouldn't have to lose her. I spent the rest of the day like I would any other. I finally slept well that night, after struggling many days with my insomnia. I woke up the next morning feeling jolly. I hopped out of bed, dressed myself for school and trotted downstairs to the living room, hoping to get a bite to eat. "Morning Mum, morning Dad," I said, throwing them a wave. They didn't respond, or at least not for a while. I stopped and watched them curiously. The look they wore worried the life out of me. Something was obviously wrong. What's wrong?" I asked, halting my body movement. I flicked my gaze between both my mum and dad like a light switch. "One of our friends, one of the Giamicos was here. They told us." My mum choked up. What is it, Mum?" I asked again, my words mixing with fear this time. My mum placed the back of her hand over her mouth and turned away from me, like she was crying. Then my father spoke. "Mrs. Giamico came over this morning and..." He released a loud sigh that echoed through the bottom floor of the house. "She said that Yuma killed herself. She committed suicide last night." That moment everything stopped, almost as if someone pressed the pause button. I thought to myself, this couldn't be happening. She promised me. She promised. I couldn't believe it, I just couldn't. I busted the front door open and examined the neighborhood. There were several cars parked outside of Yu's home. We didn't exactly live near each other but close enough to where I could see her house. Our neighborhood was pretty spread out, so it was easy to see many houses from where I lived. The cars outside of Yu's home pretty much confirmed to me that what my parents said was true. I collapsed on the ground and bawled my eyes out. I felt like such a failure. I couldn't do anything to save her. Or rather, I was already too late when I tried saving her. I was a mess for so long after that tragedy. It took me 3 years to get my life back on track. During that time I became quite distant myself. I questioned myself, I questioned morality and a slew of other things. I just didn't know where to go from there. My sleeping problem grew much worse than it had previously. I had to take pills for a while to help me fall asleep. I eventually just had to tell myself to move on. I cherish my time spent with her. Even so, I needed to let go of what happened. I eventually joined several sports clubs to help me clear my head. I stuck with volleyball and football. Between the two I was definitely better at football, but volleyball was more effective when it came to clearing my head. I became a staple to the football team due to my exceptional skills. I quickly gained fame in the school as most jocks here did. I made many new friends, the ones that I have today. They can be extremely clingy and annoying, but they are still my friends, so I can't give them too much hate. When we got back to our cabin after the hiking trip, I stood by the door, silent. Life was barely bearable before those bastards were after my money. I don't know how long I can last if they pursue me at school too. My life back at the house was already messed up enough. I don't need money grubbers trying to take away what little I have left. And now Iwaizumi was involved in all of this. That was the last thing I needed. I feel like I can truly trust him after what he did for me back there, though I still have to keep my guard up. I didn't want to have a chance to be struck from the back when I was least expecting it. Iwaizumi was rummaging through the kitchen looking for something. He eventually made his way to the bedroom with a first aid kit in hand. Just the sight made me feel bad. He went out of his way to protect me. No one has ever done that since my mum. After the long pause at the door, I entered the bedroom and quietly sat on my bed. It seemed Iwaizumi was looking through the contents of the first aid kit. I wondered if he needed any help. I would have asked, but I didn't want to interrupt his apparent focus. Instead I just pulled out one of my half-read books and worked my eyes across the words. I was startled by the sudden sound of Iwaizumi closing the kit and stuffing it under his bed. He grabbed some clothes and headed for the bathroom. I assumed he was off to shower. I felt really bad for having him step in and save me like that. I mean, it's not like I asked him to, but I just couldn't help but feel responsible. He didn't look very comfortable moving around, he must be in pain. I came up with the idea to get us dinner and bring it back here, to the cabin. That way he wouldn't have to strain himself going all the way to the food hall. I quickly ran out the door and jogged over to the food hall, buffet, kitchen, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't too far from our cabin, but I still thought it would be a good idea. I asked the lady behind the counter if I was allowed to take food out of the hall. She said it was okay as long as I didn't take a tray. She pointed me in the direction of some brown bags and told me I could use them to carry the food. I stacked 2 turkey sandwiches, a box of stir-fried noodles and a bottle of soda. I got it from a vending machine nearby. I wasn't sure how well it would taste or if this was even something Iwaizumi would drink, but I was sure that it was better than what they were serving in the kitchen. I didn't mind spending money on Iwaizumi, it doesn't seem like he would be the kind of guy to leech off someone. Plus it was not like the drink was that expensive anyway. I packed myself a turkey sandwich, a small salad and an apple, then headed back to the cabin. Thankfully Iwaizumi hadn't gotten out of the bathroom yet, so I could surprise him with dinner. I just hoped that he would be okay with my selection. I haven't known him long enough to figure out his preferences, so this was all I was able to manage. I didn't know whether to wait or not before eating my dinner. I didn't want him to feel awkward with us eating together. Though, he seemed to handle it better than I did the other night. Being torn on the decision for a while, Iwaizumi returned to the room before I could make up my mind. I knew I'd be feeling awkward and shy, cause Iwaizumi came in the room frickin' shirtless. I felt my breath being pulled right from my body as I caught a glance at his perfectly sculpted body. His large biceps with their perfect curves, to his chiseled abs, to the defined V-line that rode into his pants. I couldn't seem to breathe properly while taking in the view. After an inner battle with myself, I hid my gaze, turning my sight away from him. I didn't want to make him uncomfortable in any way. I brought you dinner, I shyly announced. I hope that's okay, I added, worried that this might not be what he wanted. He grew a warm smile before speaking. Thanks, this is really helpful. I didn't want to have to go to the buffet feeling like this. Hearing this made me overjoyed, but also a little guilty. I'm really sorry. This was all my fault after all. I really didn't know how to make it up to him. He gave his golden smile again before digging into the bag I left on his bed. There are 2 turkey sandwiches, a box of noodles, and a bottle of soda, I informed, as he curiously looked through the bag. While he continued eyeing his food and playing with the first aid kit, I finished my dinner. I had unconsciously devoured it in record time. I guess I was really hungry. I decided I would take a quick shower since it started getting a little late. I announced it to Iwaizumi in case he needed me. He quickly dug through his bag and handed me another one of his towels. On my way to dinner I checked to see if they had gotten any new towels in, but they hadn't arrived yet. Iwaizumi was kind enough to offer me another one of his. This time around he seemed to be a lot less hesitant, in fact he seemed almost happy about it. That was a relief, cause I really didn't want to cause any more trouble for him. I don't know if I could bear the guilt. After my relieving shower I returned to the bedroom, noticing Iwaizumi still sitting there, reading the labels on the contents of the kit. Iwaizumi suddenly spoke as I walked over to my bed. Do you know anything about first aid? He asked, peeling his eyes away from the item in his hand and looking up at me. Why yeah, a little, I reply, trying to keep my gaze on anything but on him. Good, give me a hand with this, he ordered, in a deep voice, dropping the kit on his bed and patting the area behind him. There was no way I could disobey, my body just started moving towards him without me doing so. My nerves were off the chart. He really wanted me to get that close to him, while he's shirtless? If only he knew I was gay. That probably wouldn't be a very good idea. I don't know how he would react. I slowly crawled onto Iwaizumi's bed behind him. When I caught sight of his back, my jaw dropped and my eyes shot open. It was much worse than I expected. I couldn't help but feel awful with myself. This really was my fault. "All right, what's the first step to all of this?" he asked, snapping me out of my trance and holding his hands to the kit. "Duh. Well, with cuts and bruises like this, it would be best to rub some aloe on it," I inform, taking out a packet of aloe gel. "All right, get to it. I'm starving," he demanded, smirking at me. Oh gosh, is he serious? Somewhere deep down I feel like he was doing this to me on purpose. Wait. You really want me to rub this on you?" I questioned, with every word shying more than the last. He nodded and went straight for his dinner. I hesitated, assessing the situation for a while. My cheeks reddened and I crept my hands to his back. When they connected with his skin, I felt tingles shoot through me like I had been electrocuted. I rubbed the aloe on him as gently as I could, slightly brushing over his bruises. "Don't hold back. I can handle it," he scolded. I guess he knew I was being extra careful. Well, I guess anyone would with the amount of pressure I applied. I really didn't want him in any more pain though, so he can't exactly blame me. He stared me down, making sure I obeyed his command. I obviously gave in to his charming gaze. His bright, solid eyes seemed to control me. I felt if he stared me down he could get me to do anything he pleased. I increased the pressure and speed of my rubbing only to hear Iwaizumi hiss in pain. Sorry. I apologized, checking to see if he was okay. "Don't worry. As I said before, don't hold back," he pressed, so I continued. His skin felt so amazing against my hands. The warmth that radiated from it crawled up my arms and caressed my body, making me shudder. This feeling was so intense yet so relaxing. The heat emitting from him practically melted the gel. It made it that much more pleasing. He was able to eat while I coated his back with the aloe. It was relieving that I was able to help him in some way. I had begun getting very sleepy, feeling like I was about to drift off into an abyss. With tiredness taking over, I was not fully aware of my actions. My hands were soon caressing Iwaizumi's sides. His sides were so silky and smooth I was mentally moaning. I could feel him quivering under my touch. Soon after, my hands drifted to his shoulders. I worked my fingers at the knots in Iwaizumi's neck and shoulders. I came to the sudden realization of what I'd been doing. My face lit up like a flare, blaring red. I was afraid of what he might do to me, but he dropped his head, groaning a little. He looked like he was fine with it, happy even. I guess he really needed it. He did seem a bit stiff after all. I just hoped he wouldn't be mad at me later for doing what I did. I really wanted to continue, but I felt the tiredness kicking in. The process came to a halt when I felt my eyes closing. "Thanks, Koa." Iwaizumi spoke quietly, turning his body towards me. My face flushed as I stayed silent. "I'm off to brush my teeth. Make yourself comfortable," he told me as he stood from the bed. "I'm sleeping on your bed again?" I asked nervously, eyeing the handsome being towering above me. I would love nothing more, but I didn't want to make him feel like it was something he had to do. "Only if you want to," he shrugged. "It would be better for both of us," he teased before heading into the bathroom. I gave him an apologetic smile. I suppose he's right. There was the possibility that my night terrors would kick in and wake Iwaizumi. I really didn't want that. If he was really comfortable with me in the same bed as him, then I would crash with him any time possible. I felt so comfortable with him last time. I felt safe, I felt guarded. It beat sleeping alone by miles. Even though I always keep up my guard, I could feel it slipping with Iwaizumi. I fell asleep before Iwaizumi had returned to the room. I was just too darn tired. Today was a long day. I curled up on his sheets, smelling his scent. It was an unusual scent, but one that I greatly liked. When morning had arrived, I pried my eyes open to the bright sun peeking through the trees and into the windows of the cabin. I crawled out of bed and while doing so noticed that I hadn't migrated over to Iwaizumi this time. That was actually surprising. I normally latch onto anything warm while I'm sleeping. I guess I was so worn out yesterday that I was even too tired to move in my sleep. I stood up slowly, trying not to make any noise or rock the bed too much. The first thing I did was sit on my bed and read. I finished up the fantasy alien novel I had been reading for a while now. The story told of a man who did everything in his power to protect a village that wasn't even his. The people of the village cheered for him every time he returned victorious from battle with the aliens. Until one day, he had been betrayed by the king, due to jealousy, and suddenly everyone turned against the man without question. Even after all he did for them, the village he worked so hard to protect eventually crumbled into nothing. The aliens and other extraterrestrial creatures invaded by that time the man had already left for another village. I don't know, I just like stories like that. Of course it did have a happy ending though. This one was definitely one of my favorites, so I'll have to remember to place it on my favorites shelf when I get home. The thought of home made me realize that there were only 3 days left on this trip. After that I would have to go back to being my father's punching bag. Hopefully Iwaizumi continues talking to me. At the moment he is the only good thing in my life. He's like the light to guide me through the dark and lonely tunnel. I need him. Not because I have romantic feelings for him, but because he's like a friend to me. Groaning and rustling coming from across the room snapped me out of my thoughts. Iwaizumi was waking up. He sat up and looked at me for a while, almost as if he wanted to say something. I, of course being the shy man that I am, couldn't lay my eyes on him, since he was still shirtless. Iwaizumi finally stood from the bed and uttered morning, while giving me a warm smile. I shyly lifted my head to him, with a goofy half-smile spread across my face. He left for the bathroom, probably getting ready for the day. Which was something I still hadn't done. I just couldn't leave that book alone for another second. Anticipating what would happen next was too much for me. I couldn't wait any longer. But now that it's finished I could get ready, well whenever Iwaizumi is finished anyway. A few minutes passed and Iwaizumi was returning to the room. I got off my bed and headed towards the bathroom. Suddenly Iwaizumi shot his hands to the side, blocking the exit. I wondered what he was doing. I turned my shy gaze to his face, only to see him wearing a completely serious look. I stopped in my tracks, getting a little scared. He looked down at me, straight into my eyes. I felt a lump form in my throat and shivers travel through my spine. I saw the cuts. There was no way he knew about the cuts on my wrist. I always have them covered. The cuts. I saw the cuts on your wrists. He replied serious, yet soft. How did he find out? I saw it last night when you fell asleep. Your bands moved enough to expose them. He answered as if knowing what I was about to ask. I just took a few steps back. Crap, this could really mess things up between us. He probably thinks of me as a fool, a loser. What if he becomes distant, now that he knows? I didn't know what to do in that type of situation, so I found myself profusely apologizing. For various reasons. I'm sorry. I choked. My mind and heart now racing. My anxiety was off the charts and I began breaking down. I'm sorry. I repeated, taking a step back every time Iwaizumi took one forward. He eventually outpaced me and when he got close to me he did something that jarred my mind. Something I did not expect. He wrapped me in his large arms ever so gently. He held me in his warm embrace. I stiffened at first, but gradually melted from his heat. I placed my hands on his chest, accepting the embrace. As my nose hit his chest that unusual, yet delightful smell engulfed my nose, putting me at ease. He leaned his head next to my ear and whispered something. Why are you apologizing? I didn't reply. I just couldn't. The situation made my mind enter a constant flood of emotions. You know, if you ever need someone to talk to know that I'll always be there. He continued to whisper. His voice sent shivers through my body. That was my first time ever hearing that sentence. I could feel my heart light up like a million candles. Whatever you're going through, know that it will eventually pass, he assured as he rubbed my back. I could feel myself tear up. It's been forever since I could just relax like this with someone. He definitely isn't your typical jock. I let out little whimpers, staining his newly worn shirt with my tears. I felt bad for doing so, but right now I just want to stay like this. Moments passed and Iwaizumi led me over to my bed. I sat down and regained my composure. Iwaizumi disappeared for a while but came back sometime later with breakfast in hand. It seemed this time he'd gotten it from the buffet or food hall, with 2 cups of decaf coffee. He handed me the bag and as it hit my lap I could smell the wonderful food inside. Thank you, Iwaizumi, I said with my gruffly voice, turning my shy gaze to the handsome being standing near the door. For everything, I finished. A smile appeared on his face, almost lighting up the room. I spent most of the day reading like I usually do. Iwaizumi was out doing whatever, I don't really know. I heard the door open, which probably meant he had returned. I was right as he entered the room seconds later. Yoko, why don't you spend more time outside? He inquired, walking up to my bed. I should be spending more time outdoors, it's just I don't really know what to do. It's not like I have friends I can hang out with, or any outdoor hobby to entertain me. I don't know. I guess I just don't really have anything to do. I lifted my head from the book to lay my sight on Iwaizumi. As I caught a glance at his face, a small smile appeared at my lips. Wanna hang with me? He questioned, looking back towards the door frame of the room. I'm going down. Before he could finish I cut him off with my reply. Sure, I piped, hopping up from my bed. He grinned as he watched me approach his side. I was excited to be spending time with someone. It was great knowing that someone wanted to hang around me, not cause they had to but rather they wanted to. Iwaizumi and I left the cabin and headed towards the trees that cast shadows over the park during the evening. Right, as I was saying earlier, I planned on heading to the beach, or close to it anyway. Sorry. I apologize with a cheeky smile, feeling a little bad for interrupting him earlier. Nah, it's all right, he assured, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. So, how are you feeling? He asked in a more serious tone. I immediately knew what he was referring to, but it took me a moment to reply. I'm fine, I respond, looking up from the grass to him wearing a smile. That's good, he replied, with a handsome smile creeping on his lips. We walked a while longer, almost reaching our destination in a comfortable silence. Thanks again, Iwaizumi, I utter quietly, looking down to my feet. I peeked up a little to catch a smile still on his face. Oh, we're here, Iwaizumi announced as we arrived at a grass patch near the beach. This area made me realize just how many beautiful locations this park contained. Iwaizumi sat in the grass and patted the area beside him, meaning for me to sit next to him like he usually does. So what are your hobbies besides reading? He asks as I position myself next to him. I mean, you've said you don't have much to do outdoors, so do you have anything besides reading to occupy yourself with? Duh. Not really. I guess I usually spend my time walking, or reading. Back home I go sightseeing every so often. I'm kind of fascinated with nature, so there's that. I explain, naturally. It was kind of odd feeling the old me resurfacing. Iwaizumi is pulling out whatever is locked away inside of me. I can feel myself opening up to him. It's not even fully intentional. I may not strike you as the kind of guy, but I enjoy walks as well. Whenever I can get them, at least. He sighed out the last part. Whenever you can get them, I questioned softly, tilting my head to him. I was curious what he meant by that. Yeah, my friends or family are usually glued to me, so I don't get much me time, he explained with displeasure clearly present. Oh, was all I managed to say before getting lost in thought. I would love to have friends and family like that. But instead everyone sees me as invisible, unless they need something from me. You never did tell me your full name. I mumbled, realizing that all I knew about him until now was that his family name is Iwaoi, and he's a jock. Heh. Well, I don't really like my full name, so I avoid giving it to anyone. He responded awkwardly, scratching his ear. You called my name dorky, it's the least you could do. I press, slyly. He gave me a look that was begging me to drop the question, but I'm far too intrigued to let it go now. Instead I give him a smug expecting expression. Fine, I'll tell you my darned name, just promise not to laugh. He gave in then eyed me waiting for my response. I simply nodded, growing with anticipation. My name is Iwaoi Hajime Alfrey, but I go by my middle or family name. He forcefully blurted out and finished with a little sigh. He facepalmed as he saw my face-splitting grin. I like it. I think it sounds cute. I admit shyly. He looked relieved when he saw that my grin subsided into a little smile. You really like it? He asked, raising his head. Yeah. It's dorky, but I like it. I tease, only to receive a punch on the shoulder. We couldn't help but to erupt into laughter. After our laughter died down I had to ask him something that's been on my mind since this morning. So, how's your back? I ask, with guilt seeping to the surface. It's fine. All the cuts closed overnight, so I'm able to move around. He said, giving me a reassuring smile. A half-smile appeared on my lips for a mere second before disappearing. We sat in silence for a while before I decided to break it with another question. You mentioned your family is clingy, does that mean you have any siblings? Or is it just your parents? I have an adopted younger brother and an older sister who doesn't live at home anymore. My parents are the real problem though. He answered, sounding exhausted. I guess they must be some pretty crazy people. They are always inviting their loud friends over. They talk for hours and boast about how I'm such a good kid. He sighed. I'm tired of all the hugs and kisses on my cheek. They should know that I'm not a kid anymore. He complains. Gosh, what I wouldn't give to have parents like that. What about you? Do you have any siblings? He returned the question. If only. A sibling would be just the thing to get me through these hard times. I guess I'm unlucky to be an only child. No. I answer with a hint of disappointment in my tone. Oh, what about your parents? He shoots another question. What about my parents? I squinted my eyes, answering the question with another. Are you close? He clarified. This time it seemed he was a little more cautious with his words. I felt like a jerk responding to him like that, but it's just a sensitive subject. What am I supposed to tell him? That my father abuses me, that he scared away my mother. That's a little much for someone I haven't even known for a week. After getting lost in thought I finally mumbled a simple reply. Far from it actually. Everything went silent again, but moments later I felt a hand wrap around my side. I turned my gaze to Iwaoi who was burning my heart with his charming smile. He was like the sun. I could feel my body getting warm and flustered as his beautiful crystal eyes captured my sight. With the view of the beach being so beautiful I found it difficult to believe something could be more captivating. I wasn't able to break contact with him. My soul wouldn't budge, not even an inch. I just felt so happy, so content sitting there, with him. We stayed there a while longer watching as the sun hit the horizon. Sometime later we went off for a walk around the park. We chatted as we took in the sights. When we arrived in a clearing near the forest I spotted an adorable little bunny. Iwaoi, look. I hopped, pointing to the cute little animal. He scanned the area for a second, and when he spotted the bunny a smile popped onto his face. I'm gonna pet him. I announced with great confidence. Iwaoi chuckled at my enthusiasm as I slowly crept on the furry monster. We both entered a state of complete silence as I approached the bunny. For some strange reason it didn't run. It just sat there and watched as I closed the distance between us. To my shocking surprise, I was able to reach it. This one must be used to humans, otherwise there would be no possible way I could get this close. I looked back at Iwaizumi with the biggest smile on my face. I took the warm furry creature into my hands and petted it gently. I was able to hold back no matter how hard I wanted to snuggle it. Iwaizumi made his way to my side, smiling back at me. I'm gonna name him. I paused, trying to think of a suitable name for the cute little furball. Iwa-chan. The cutest pout appeared on his face as I announced the bunny's name. Iwaizumi watched as I petted Iwa-chan. He was so relaxed in my arms, but when the sound of shouting teens neared, he stiffened and hopped off. I was a little sad he had gone, but I'd get over it. All the noise coming from the park must mean it's time for dinner. Or well, let's get dinner before all the good stuff is gone. I sigh, standing from the grassy floor. It's a good thing we didn't stray too far from the park, otherwise it would have been a pain getting back since the sun is setting. Iwaizumi nudged me on the shoulder, with a smile as we were heading back. Looks like we got here just in time. Iwaizumi chuckled. I was shocked at how fast the food went. We quickly grabbed some trays and stacked them with food. I got a sloppy joe with a salad and some fries. Iwaizumi got a large grilled chicken sandwich, some rice and a fruit salad. There was quite a variety to choose from, but with limited quantity. Iwaizumi just managed to snag the last milk bread. There's a good place to sit, Iwaizumi notified, jerking his head towards the table near the door. I followed close behind as he made his way over. On our way over, Iwaizumi bought 2 cans of lemonade from the nearby vending machine. We sat our trays down and settled in. The food tasted amazing this time around. After trying the sloppy joe, I dug into my salad. As expected, it tasted like a salad. Halfway through the meal, Iwaizumi popped up like he remembered something. I totally forgot. He piped before pushing a can of lemonade my way. For you, he simply said. I was about to apologize for having him spend money on me, but he shut me up before I could make a sound. It was kind of funny seeing how he was already picking up on my habits. As he retracted his hands from the can of lemonade, he grabbed my sloppy joe and took a huge bit out of it. A smile split my face as I realized what he was doing. I was happy he was comfortable enough around me to share food. He scanned me for a moment, looking skeptical. I thought you would have been a little more upset. He spoke, suspicious, narrowing his eyes. I just shook my head with the goofy smile still present on my face. He liked the taste of the sloppy joe, and it got me curious as to how his bread tasted. I guess it's my turn to steal. I snuck my left hand under the table and popped it out from the side, snatching the half-eaten milk bread sandwich off his plate. I quickly took a bite, leaving a small mark next to his large one before he could object. A huge grin appeared on his face when he saw that I bit into his sandwich. I guess he's okay with it as well. We finished up and headed for the door, but was stopped by a woman, an instructor who was just entering the dining hall. We've finally received those towels this morning. Just head to the storage room and they should be there. Oh, and whatever you do, don't give any to Maki and Matson. I don't want him setting this park on fire. She mumbled the last sentence. She waved, heading off towards the buffet displays. I thanked her before she disappeared into the crowd of students. I guess that means I won't have to use your towels anymore, I state, looking up at Iwaizumi with a weak smile. For some reason he looked a bit disappointed, but maybe it was just me. All right, let's head home, I say, wanting to get back to the cabin. What about the towels? Iwaizumi asked, sounding confused. I'll pick them up on my way back. All right, just let me grab my drink, he said, looking back to our table. He eyed it for a while, noticing his drink was missing. I finished mine earlier and snagged his as we headed for the door. He returned his gaze to me with a questioning look on his face. I raised a can of lemonade in my hand with a devious grin. He narrowed his eyes and grew a smirk. I darted out the door before he could get it back from me. He was right on my heels and I couldn't help but to burst into laughter. Soon after starting my sprint I was already running out of breath. Iwaizumi was just fine though. I guess that's what I get for messing with a jock. I knew he was going to catch up, so I took the largest gulp of his lemonade before he could catch me. Just before I could reach the storage closet I felt his muscular arms wrap around my waist. He had completely stopped me from moving. We sat like that for a while and I could feel huffs of air from Iwaizumi, tickling my neck. I did whatever I could to hold back a whimper, but failed. The huffs down my neck sent tingles through my body. Iwaizumi began trailing his large hand up my arm that I was holding in the air. Once it reached the top he snatched a can of lemonade right out of my hand. He released me and I turned around just in time to see him quickly finishing the contents of the can. I couldn't help but to giggle. I grabbed a couple towels, then we headed back to our cabin. The first thing I did was shower. I always feel good showering after a meal. Iwaizumi laid on his bed surfing the internet waiting his turn. I made sure not to take long. Once out I popped open one of my many books and began reading. When I heard Iwaizumi's footsteps approaching the room I lifted my sight to spot him shirtless again. My face flushed with a sudden crimson. I didn't realize I was staring. I bet I looked like the biggest idiot. Now would be a good time to have something sweet. Crap, why didn't I bring something from home? He mumbled to himself as he made his way over to his bed. That reminded me that I had a large stash of candy I haven't touched in days. I pulled my eyes away from Iwaizumi and grabbed my bag from the floor. I flipped it upside down, letting the contents inside spill out. Candy and books came crashing to the floor. Iwaizumi jerked his head towards the sound, and his eyes lit up when he saw the floor. I say that I want to save my money for necessities, but candy is one thing I can't live without. The sweetness nulls the pain when I'm having a horrible day. Holy shit, that's a lot of candy. So that's what you've been hiding in that bag? He exclaimed in shock. If you want you can take as many as you'd like. I utter, doing my best to keep my eyes off him. You sure? He asked, checking to see if I was serious. I nod in response. All right then, he said, making his way over. To my surprise he sat on my bed, right next to me. His bare skin almost touching me. He leaned over my lap to grab a few bars from the floor. I could feel the heat generating from his naked torso. I shut my legs tight, not wanting to reveal my excitement. Blood was rushing through me like a waterfall. I could feel my body reacting. There is no way he can know how I feel about him. He could react badly to it and I don't want to jeopardize our current relationship. Gah, this is just what I needed. I love this kind. He sighed in satisfaction, ripping off the wrapper. I decided to take one as well. I was feeling my candy withdrawal kicking in. You must be some kind of candy whore if you brought this much on a school trip, he said as he finished his bar. I guess I am, I replied, grinning like a dork. He punched me playfully on the shoulder while chortling. A while after we finished eating we went back to what we were doing. Iwaizumi searched the net, and I read. It was getting late so I decided to prepare for bed. I didn't know when Iwaizumi planned on doing so I just waited in my bed while reading. I didn't ask cause I didn't want to make him feel like he had to go to bed for my sake. A few minutes passed. He stood from his bed and headed off to the bathroom. I shut my book and cleaned the floor, stuffing all the candy back in my bag. By the time I finished putting away my stuff Iwaizumi had returned to the room, still shirtless. I hope it doesn't bother you if I sleep shirtless, he said heading towards his bed. Oh gosh. I have a feeling I won't be able to fall asleep tonight. I can see myself melting under the covers. With that said I still shook my head no. Who was I to deny him that? He's going out of his way to make sure I feel comfortable, and so that I don't get night terrors. Alright, well I'm going to bed. You can hop in anytime, just make sure to shut out the light. He smiled at me as he got in bed. I'm heading to bed now too, I inform, slowly walking towards the bed. "Oh, all right," he responded, lifting the covers for me. I shut off the light before crawling in next to him. I could already feel the heat from his muscular body soaking the covers. I'm afraid I might snuggle against him tonight, like I did a couple days ago. He seemed to take it well the first time, but I don't want to make him think I'm doing it on purpose. Iwaizumi let out a large sigh before settling into his pillow. "Night, dog," he teased. "Night, Iwa-chan," I fired back, in a sleepy tone. He laughed and poked my side, making me squirm. I guess he really doesn't like that name. And with that we were off to sleep, despite my earlier worries. I did not expect Oikawa to break down like he did when I confronted him about his cuts. He seemed really scared. Almost like I was going to attack him. He wept in my arms with his tears covering my shirt. My instinct kicked in and I tightly wrapped him in my arms. I made sure to let him know that I was there for him anytime he needed it. After a long embrace I led him over to his bed and he eventually calmed down. While he was collecting his thoughts I figured it would be a good time to get breakfast. I jogged down to the food hall and bagged us both something to eat. I snagged some warm egg rolls, bean tacos, and 2 cups of decaf coffee. On my way back to the cabin I realized how lonely and broken Oikawa seems. I'd love to help him, but he just keeps so much to himself. I won't pressure him to tell me anything though. Oikawa popped his head up, hearing me enter the room. I gave him a weak smile before handing him the bag. He thanked me for everything, with his hoarse voice. Anyone could tell he'd been crying. I couldn't help but smile. It made me happy knowing that he appreciated me. I spent the next couple of hours scouring the park, checking to see if there was anything interesting happening. I noticed the large fire pit in the middle of the park had been used quite a bit. I guess this is where a lot of the students hang. There were some amazing locations around the park that I'd never noticed. Oikawa would probably like them. That got me curious as to why he hasn't spent more time outdoors. After touring the park I headed into town. I don't think we're allowed to without a supervisor, but I don't care. This gave me time to check out all of the amazing stores. I spotted bakery after bakery. The smells emitting from the various shops reminded me of Italy. A few years back my dad took me on a trip to Italy and as we roamed the streets we could smell the amazing aromas emitting from the parted doors of the many bakeries placed throughout the town we were staying in. After my sightseeing I returned to the cabin. Oikawa was still reading, just like he was when I left. When I asked why he didn't go outside more he replied saying he didn't really have anything to do. I assumed that was cause he didn't have anyone to hang out with. I figured this would be a good time to show him some sights around the park. I asked if he wanted to hang and he gladly agreed. I decided to head to the beach first. We ended up talking about our families. He told me he's an only child and that he doesn't get along with his parents much. I still felt there was quite a bit he wasn't telling me though, but like I said earlier, I won't force him. He seemed to really cheer up as we continued talking. He got me to reveal my full name to him, and his reaction was comforting yet unsettling at the same time. He said my name was cute, but I feel like he'll eventually start using it against me. Soon we left the beach and lingered into a clearing. Oikawa spotted a bunny and had the most adorable reaction. I could feel my heart wanting to burst. I just wanted to wrap Oikawa in my arms, I don't even know why. I just had this urge. Luckily I was able to hold back. To both our surprises Oikawa managed to catch the bunny. He named it Iwa-chan. I couldn't tell if he was teasing me or if it was a compliment, cause he really seemed to like the bunny. That had me flattered. The bunny was eventually scared away by loud noises, so me and Oikawa decided to head off for dinner. I got a chicken sandwich, some rice and a fruit salad. I also managed to snag the last milk bread. Oikawa got a sloppy joe, fries, and a salad. To be honest I wanted to try his, he had quite a selection. There's a good spot to sit, I say, jerking my head towards the table near the door. I was a little surprised no one took it as it's one of the nicest areas in the building. I grabbed 2 cans of lemonade from a nearby vending machine then sat at the table. The food was amazing, much better than usual. The chicken sandwich tasted much more delicious than I imagined. I was so lost in the taste that I only remembered the lemonade halfway through the meal. I totally forgot. For you, I said, handing a can to Oikoa. I knew he felt bad for me buying him something, so I shut him up before he could apologize. It seemed he found it humorous that I knew what he was going to do, which was a good thing. I didn't want to offend him. As I retracted my hands from the can of lemonade, I figured now would be a good time to get a taste of his food, so I snagged his sloppy joe right from his plate. A large smile grew on Oikoa's face as I bit into his food, and gosh dang it was good. I scanned his expression, feeling a little skeptical as it was not the one I expected to see. I thought you would have been upset, I asked, curious as to why he looked so jolly. He shook his head, still wearing that adorable look. Before I knew it, he had taken my milk bread and bit into it, leaving a small bite mark next to mine. I couldn't help but to break a grin. I guess we were even after that. The way Oikoa drank the lemonade had me in awe. He just lifted the can and chugged it. We finished up our dinner and headed back to the cabin. Though we were stopped at the door. It seemed the instructor had gotten some new towels in. She told Oikoa to head to the storage room to pick some up. I guess that means I won't have to use your towels anymore, he stated. I could help but feel a little disappointed. It made me feel stupid, but I couldn't shake it off. All right, let's head home, he says, seeming a little eager. What about the towels? I ask, confused. I'll pick them up on my way back. All right, just let me grab my drink, I say before looking back to our table. I scanned it a while only to notice my drink was missing. Could have I already finished it? I don't recall doing so though. I looked back to Oikoa confused, wondering if he knew what happened to it. To my shock, he raised the can, with a sly grin possessing his face. I narrowed my eyes with a smirk creeping to my lips. Before I could lunge at him, he darted for the door, leaving me a few steps behind him. A moment after I tailed him, he began bursting out in laughter. I knew he couldn't keep up his pace forever, so I planned on letting him wear himself down, that is until I saw he was heading for the storage closet. I'd lose my chance at catching him if he locked me out. I picked up speed hoping to catch up to him. He probably knew I would, so he took a large gulp from the can. I let out a chuckle before grabbing him. I wrapped my arms around his small waist and lowered my head to his shoulder from exhaustion. It felt so amazing holding him. The way his soft skin melded with my fingers. What really sent me over the edge was his soft little whimper. I could feel my insatiable hunger for him double in size. I had to hold myself back though. He's already going through a rough time it seems, so I didn't want him to have any more on his plate. I slowly slid a hand up his small soft arm, then grabbed the lemonade from his hand. I quickly gulped the rest of the can before he could try and get it back from me. He giggled as he watched. When we finished messing around, Oikoa took a few towels from the storage room and we headed back to our cabin. Oikoa and I took turns showering, with Oikoa going first. As I waited, I surfed the net for anything interesting. I avoided all social media cause I know I would have been bombarded by my friends. I shut my phone and entered the shower when Oikoa finished. The water washing over my skin felt great. It made this eventful day feel more rewarding. I dressed myself in nothing but a pair of underwear and some sweatpants and returned to the room. Now would be a good time to have something sweet. Crap, why didn't I bring something from home? I say to myself as I headed for my bed. A moment later a loud noise echoed through the room, making me jerk my head in the direction of the sound. My eyes almost jumped from my head as I saw a large pile of candy flood the floor next to Oikoa's bed. Holy shit, that's a lot of candy. So that's what you've been hiding in that bag. I mumbled the last part in realization. If you want you can take as many as you'd like. Koa muttered softly. You sure? I check, making sure he isn't pushing my buttons. He nodded. Gosh, this dude is a total angel. All right then. I say, trotting over to his bed. I hope I'm not making him uncomfortable by being shirtless. He would have to get used to it eventually though, so I guess it couldn't hurt. I propped myself next to Koa and grabbed a few bars off the floor. Gah, this is just what I needed. I love this kind. I exclaim, noticing one of my favorite brands of candy. This was the perfect way to end the day. You must be some kind of candy whore if you brought this much on a school trip. I tease after finishing my bar. I guess I am. He replied, wearing a goofy grin. I gave him a playful punch on the shoulder, laughing a bit. After plowing through a lot of the candy I returned to my bed, scouring through the web. It started getting a little late so I decided to get ready for bed. I stayed shirtless as it was far more comfortable sleeping. I wasn't sure if Koa wouldn't be against it so I asked. I hope it doesn't bother you if I sleep shirtless. And to my delight he shook his head. Alright, well I'm going to bed. You can hop in anytime, just make sure to shut out the light. I say, getting ready to doze off. I'm heading to bed now too. He announced, making his way over. Oh, alright. I replied, lifting the covers for him. He shut off the light before crawling in next to me. The last couple of nights' sleep have been amazing. This was probably cause of little Koa. I let out a sigh of relief as I relaxed into my pillow. Night, dog. I teased. Night Iwa-chan. He fired back. I chuckled and jabbed him in the side in response, making him squirm a little. I just knew this would become a thing, him using the name to tease me. What have I gotten myself into? And with that we were off to sleep.